Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Today we have a returning guest, Erika Donalds, on the show. I'm very excited because she is a returning guest, but she has a new role in the world, and it's a very important one. She is the chair of the America First Policy Institute's Center for Education Opportunity. Erika, I know you've founded a bunch of charter schools, and this has been your area of interest for about 15 years now. And I'm so impressed that you get to do this and kind of interface with the new administration. So tell us a little bit about how that's going.
Yeah, I really am living in my school choice dream world right now. As I've been working on school choice for 15 years. I served on my local school board about 10 years ago, but dedicated my life to expanding education opportunities for families like myself. That's why I got into this. I needed school choice for my own kids. And being at America First Policy Institute, heading up their education nationally, not only do I get to continue to work on school choice in the States, which is where it belongs, as we know, but I also get to interface with the White House and Congress and Secretary McMahon and her team on the things that they're doing to respond to the executive orders and to eventually dismantle the Department of Education. So I'm really having a great time traveling back and forth to DC and just making sure that we use this time that we have with Trump in office to deliver on his promises to the American people.
Well, and that last one that you mentioned, dismantling the Department of Ed, obviously that's getting quite a bit of attention. And there's some people that I think it's misleading. I think the media has been very misleading about what the Department of Ed does, the federal Department of Ed. So you have your state Department of Ed, and then you have the federal Department of Ed. There is a certain amount of funding. But can we just kind of go through from your perspective what that looks like? Because I think people hear that and there's suddenly stories about kids aren't going to get their lunches anymore and there's going to be money taken from teachers and all of that. So if we can just kind of dive into what that means.
Absolutely. The federal Department of Education doesn't educate a single child. It actually only makes up about 10% of the education funding that makes it down to each individual classroom in our public education system. A lot of that is focused on low income and special needs students. But President Trump and Secretary McMahon have made it very clear that that funding is going to continue. So then what does it mean to dismantle the Department of Education if the funding is going to continue to flow? Well, some of that funding was being passed down to the states to handle these responsibilities through HHS before the Department of Education even existed 45 years ago. So we're going back to the way it was. It doesn't need to be a separate department. That money can still flow to the states. But what is going away? It's the multiple layers of bureaucracy that is required to report back on the services that are being given to the students. We've heard from teachers that they spend more time filling out paperwork than actually performing services for students with special needs. We want to take that away, eliminate the bureaucracy, allow states and local districts to ensure that these services are going to continue, but give them more money and more flexibility in order to serve the students that they know best.
So were they having to fill out that information to get that back to get grants and that kind of thing? I mean, because it just seems like that's something that should have always been on the local level. Even if you get a grant, there should be someone kind of interfacing on the ground to make sure that that is actually what it went to is actually happening.
And that's why the federal department existed, frankly. They were passing out money, and someone at the state level had to receive that money and document how they passed it down to the local level. Someone at the local district had to be there as an employee getting paid to document how it goes down to the classroom. The teacher has to report back what services. That has to report back from the district to the state. Think about the multiple layers of bureaucrats that are required just for money to go from the federal government down to the classrooms. What's astonishing is that the teachers' unions who control most of these individuals between the federal government and the classrooms are the ones saying that they're no longer going to provide these services, even though they're going to be getting the money to do so.
So I think that's been kind of the confusion when you've heard people talk about this, is that they feel like this has been there forever. You know, for most of us, we've always known that there was a federal Department of Ed from the time we were little kids to now. This has been there. And it seems like, gosh, this is a massive amount of people. How many people work at the Department of Ed? 4,000?
Well, before 2 weeks ago, it was about 4,400. But
Okay.
as you probably know, just a week after Linda McMahon was confirmed, they did a reduction in force, which cut that number in half. And this was excess waste and bloat. Frankly, one of the examples that they gave us was that there were 6 different strategic communications departments in the Department of Education. Obviously, that's not helping students get educated. That's messaging to whomever, right? And the average salary at the department was $140,000. So now, after the reduction in force and after some of the employees, a few hundred, took the buyouts that were offered, we're down to about 1,300 employees in the department remaining. Some of those may be shifted off to other departments that are taking on some of the responsibilities. Office of Civil Rights, we're talking about going to Justice. The student loan portfolio may be going to SBA, as the president announced last week. So some of those employees will continue to do those functions in a different department. But DOE was already the smallest department in the federal government. So it does not need to remain a department unto itself, just so that some of the functions can continue.
I mean, it's interesting because I've heard so many people say, how can you support getting rid of these people and just cutting them? And in these conversations, you know, I think a lot of us who are in the private sector have said, you know what, it's unfortunate, but when you restructure a business, people lose their jobs and they have to find other jobs. And though I don't ever wish that upon someone, there are other jobs out there. However, you saying that the average salary was $140,000 kind of blows my mind a little bit. I mean, that's more than the governor of Michigan makes in a year, you know? So I'm a little bit stunned by that. And I can see now why there is so much concern, because your lifestyle is going to really change. I mean, there aren't that many jobs out there that you come into from a government position and you would go into at $140,000 a year.
It's unfortunate. You know, you and I have the same compassion for these individuals. Many of them are there because they love education. Maybe they have come from a teaching position and worked their way up. And it's not about that. Our nation is in crisis in more ways than one. Like, we're in a debt crisis. We've got to get our spending under control at the federal level. Our children are inheriting this massive debt and bureaucracy. So that's one thing. But our nation is also in an academic performance crisis where we're turning out only 1 in 3 students that are reading proficiently. How are these people going to run our businesses, run our cities and our counties and our states, and carry forward the responsibilities of a republic? So we have to fix this problem. We cannot continue at the status quo. And I fully support all of the actions that Trump has taken, and immediate actions, thank goodness, to get this really bureaucracy under control and push the accountability as well down to the states to just do better with their performance.
Well, and how do you, I mean, I guess there's some of that is a concern of how do you keep the states accountable if you have no federal Department of Ed? And we're coming off of COVID. I think Secretary McMahon is walking in at a time when everybody has been very lackadaisical about holding anyone accountable. I mean, in the state of Michigan, we're now the 41st state in the nation for education. It's really gone downhill. I mean, this has gone down, I think, 10 points since Gretchen Whitmer took office. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of push. It's kind of one of those uncomfortable conversations, to be honest with you, because if you sit down and you say, man, the schools in the state are terrible, parents are like, what do you want us to do? This is our schools. You're insulting me. You're saying something that is very offensive to me. And I think even with the options, even with the school choice options, a lot of people end up in public schools. So, and we should want our public schools to thrive. So what is the answer to getting those schools back on track so kids are reading?
I think a lot of it does have to do with transparency. And that is one aspect of the federal department that will continue, perhaps in a different area like the census, to expose how our schools are performing in the different states, and even maybe in a more granular way so parents and voters can hold their elected officials accountable. But ultimately, it is the responsibility of the states and then the voters of those states to hold elected officials accountable if their students are not performing. And right now you have a bit of, finger pointing because there are so many federal mandates. It's easy for a state to say, well, the federal government is involved and we've got to do this, this, and that. We don't want to have them allow that excuse any longer. So with the states completely responsible for education, that's where the voters can look at the performance and say, listen, Governor Whitmer, you are doing a terrible job and these students are not performing under your watch, and hold that person accountable. And yeah, the blue states are going to have to come to a reckoning with their voters, just like they have on many other issues. But unfortunately, the red states are going to, I believe, with school choice, competition, and free market, continue to outperform. And maybe that's a source of competition amongst the states.
All right, we're going to get back into all of the details with Erika Donalds, but first I want to tell you about my partners at IFCJ. After more than a year of war, terror, and pain in Israel, the need for security essentials and support for first responders is still critical. Even in these times of ceasefire, Israel must be prepared for the next attack wherever it may come from because Israel is surrounded on all sides by enemies. And the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews has supported and will continue to support the people of Israel with life-saving security essentials. And your gift today will help save lives by providing bomb shelters, armored security vehicles, ambulances, firefighting equipment, flak jackets, bulletproof vests, and so much more. Your generous donation today will help ensure the people of Israel are safe and secure in the days to come. So give a gift to bless Israel and her people by visiting supportifcj.org. That's one word. It's supportifcj.org, or you can call 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-IFCJ. 888-488-4325. Now stay tuned. We'll be right back with Erika after this. For those of the folks that are in a state that doesn't have school choice, I mean, in Michigan, we have choice within the public education system, but it doesn't extend to private schools or faith-based schools. For a state like Florida, explain your school choice program and how that's changed the state of education over the years.
We are so fortunate in Florida to be a school choice state. We now have both public and private school choice. About 10% of our kids are in charter schools, and those students are outperforming their demographic equivalent in the public schools. Not only that, but there's also studies around the country showing that when there is choice, even if it's just charter schools, public school choice, it does elevate the performance of the related public schools in those areas. In Florida, we also have private school choice in the form of education scholarship accounts. Now, 14 states have universal ESAs. But in Florida, we have over 500,000 students that are on an ESA where they're getting $9,000 per student to use on tuition at a private school, but they can also customize taking different courses, purchasing curriculum and materials and things like that. So it is a completely different ballgame here in Florida where we're starting to see the supply and the innovation come about. And there's more and more options for families here in Florida. I think people are going to start moving down to states like Florida, Arizona, soon to be Texas, Tennessee, because they're going to get that extra money to help their children get a better education.
Is the ESA program there publicly funded, or is that privately funded?
It is publicly funded. It used to be a tax credit scholarship, and hopefully we'll have a federal tax credit scholarship here passing soon. But we did change it over to where it is funded with the same dollars that would otherwise go to your public school are now going into an account that is controlled by the parent.
So the complaint with that is then you could potentially be closing public schools. How has that the numbers that I've seen, it doesn't show that public schools do close, but what have you seen in Florida?
Listen, public schools don't close regardless. I mean, they could be completely empty and they won't close. Even in Florida, we've had a really hard time getting school boards to come to the realization that you have to close these schools or consolidate and give these kids another opportunity because it is failing. Listen, I was on the school board. I've been in these battles of this school is half empty. What do we need to do to attract students? I think it takes them hitting rock bottom. And I'm sorry, but that's the way that the system works. When you fail, you cannot be subsidized. You cannot be rewarded for failure with more money and more subsidization. We have to have the same accountability for schools, public schools, that we would for private schools, that we would for charter schools and any other business, or we're not going to see the improvement that inevitably comes about when failure happens. Failure is good in a free market society because it tells you what doesn't work and forces you to redirect those resources into something that will work. That's what we need. We need that.
And polls show that people like this. I mean, that's something that I think that we've had a lot of pushback in the media, but the polling of actual voters are saying, hey, we support candidates who support school choice.
More than ever, over 70% overall support for school choice, including 67% of Democrats. and higher number for independents and much higher, well over 70% for Republicans. So this is becoming one of those 80-20 issues that the Democrats just refuse to fold on because they are loyal to the teachers unions who are funding their campaign. 98% of donations, political donations from teachers unions go to Democrats. So even though 67% of their voters support school choice, 0%, virtually 0% of Democrat legislators and elected officials are supportive of school choice.
Well, I mean, this is a guaranteed income for them if teachers unions have public schools open, it's a guaranteed income. And I think that's something that people don't understand, that teachers are forced into the union in most states. And then if they're in the union, they're obviously paying dues. Those dues are getting paid out of their paycheck, which is taxpayer funded. And therefore, your taxpayer dollars are often funding Democrats to get elected.
100%. And thankfully, states like Florida, I actually advocated for paycheck protection for 10 years before it finally got passed under Governor DeSantis. So props to him in the legislature for finally getting it done. And that means that our school districts no longer subsidize the collection of union dues on behalf of our teachers unions. They cannot be automatically taken out of the paychecks any longer. That, combined with laws that allow for decertification when union membership falls below a certain threshold, in Florida, I believe it's now 50%, it keeps the unions on their toes, and in some cases allows for another type of organization to come in to be the collective bargaining unit for those teachers that may not have the same political ties as a traditional teachers union, member of one of the national organizations. So we're seeing reforms. Obviously, we've gotten some Supreme Court decisions that have gone our way as well, not forcing people to be members of the union any longer in the states around the country. And so I think that will continue to evolve, but that's also why school choice is so great for teachers, because it gives them a non-union option that will allow great teachers to thrive and even perhaps get paid more for their better performance for going into more difficult neighborhoods, which you cannot do in the public schools.
Stick around. We've got more with Erika Donalds. But first, I want to tell you about my partners at Wired to Fish. I recently came across this company and they're making a huge difference worldwide. Again, it's called Wired to Fish Coffee. I love the brand for a couple of reasons, but one of the biggest ones is because it aligns with my faith by putting their profits where their mouth is. Wired to Fish Coffee gives 25% of their net profits to faith-based programs and clean water initiatives. 25%. And the coffee is delicious. It's sourced in Guatemala and Mexico and known for some of the finest coffee beans in the world. Wired to Fish Coffee's rich Arabica blend has already been loved by thousands who comment on its smooth finish and amazing taste. So give Wired to Fish Coffee a try today and join a community of like-minded people making a difference. I mean, seriously, you guys, you're all drinking coffee. I know you are. So drink coffee that has something that you're passionate about. It's Wired to Fish Coffee. Head over there now. wiredtofishcoffee.com. That's wired, the number 2, fishcoffee.com. And use Tudor, that code Tudor, for 15% off your first order. Now stay tuned. We'll be right back after this. So you talked a lot about being in DC. You said now that Donald Trump has been elected, you've been there quite a bit. Obviously, we know your husband, Congressman Byron Donalds, is in DC as much as Congress is in session. So now you're probably actually seeing a little bit more of him. But you guys recently made an announcement that you'd like to spend a little bit more time in Florida. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that Donald Trump came out and gave him the Run, Byron, Run tweet with a full endorsement of Byron for governor of Florida. So just a few days later, about a month ago now, my husband announced that he would be running for governor. We've been in Florida since we were in college. We met at Florida State University, which is in Tallahassee, our state capital, started dating, got married, built a life, built a family. We spent 20 years in financial services before ever getting involved in politics. It was not in our plans at all. But we had been serving the community in different ways and just had been encouraged to get more involved in public service. So it's kind of been a progression where, more and more people have trusted us, and especially my husband, with decisions on behalf of our community, from State House to Congress. And now, we hope that we can get the endorsement of the majority of Floridians to go to Tallahassee and really make a difference in a state that's been so good to us and is in such a great position to really thrive in the coming years. And DeSantis is termed out, so he's not running again. So we just are really looking forward to it. It's been an awesome first month of the campaign. So much support. We've got a kickoff this weekend, a rally in our hometown here in Southwest Florida. So it's exciting. And I just feel honored that so many people trust him, trust us with such a big responsibility.
There have been some other names that have been thrown around. I mean, Matt Gaetz had been thrown around. I think he said he's not going to run. But you talked about Ron DeSantis being term limited. Casey DeSantis is not. So there has been some talk about the First Lady of Florida running for governor. What do you think? What are you hearing behind the scenes on that?
That has come up a few times. She's teased a run. I don't know what she's going to do, but I know my husband has an incredible track record, both voting in the state house and in Congress. He's got the most conservative track record from all of the groups that, track these things when it comes to votes. But also he spent 20 years in financial services and banking and in insurance. And those are the things that really bring something to the table for Florida. We have an insurance crisis and property taxes. He totally understands those issues. And we want to be the financial and business capital of the world. We're already well on our way there. So I just think that his background really aligns well with where we're positioned as a state right now. And the fact that he does have such a conservative track record really speaks to Floridians.
I mean, Florida is a unique state because when you're looking at states like Florida or California, you have a propensity for natural disasters there. You obviously have a propensity for hurricanes. And I assume that's what you're talking about when it comes to insurance. Does he believe that his background in insurance would help him in crisis situations like that? Because I think anybody who is looking at who can lead the state, in your state specifically, that would be a great concern, is that we have a natural disaster almost every year, and that puts you directly into crisis mode every fall.
Sure. That's one aspect of it. Our insurance market is really in crisis right now. We've had a lot of carriers leave the state, because of some of the natural disasters. There's legislation that could be improved in order to better the insurance markets here, both property insurance and car insurance. So that's a big concern. So just the mechanisms of that. He did serve as a chair of that committee in the state house when he was there. But also in Southwest Florida, unfortunately, we've had a lot of direct hits while he has been a representative either at the state or congressional level. So he has been on the ground in Southwest Florida. I remember during Irma, there were 3 weeks that I didn't see him because he was out there on the ground helping our community when we first got hit in 2017. We got hit with Ian a couple of years ago. And of course, he was in Congress at the time, so facilitating a lot of those disaster recovery efforts. So he's got that direct experience, not just in the markets and preparing for those things, but actually being on the ground, helping our community directly when they hit.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you have a lot ahead of you these are two big things. You've got education and you've got a big campaign coming up. What does Byron, for the congressman, what is the biggest issue that he thinks Florida is facing? I mean, you talked about insurance, but there must be something that he is just driving him to get out there and say, I want to do this. I want to serve for the people right directly in my state on the highest level that he can.
It really does center around individual liberty and freedom. I think a lot of people don't know we started off in politics in the Tea Party movement, and it was all centered around small government and the government not getting in the way, picking winners and losers, doing bailouts. And that's what got us involved in politics in the first place. And my husband went back and read things like Frederick Bastiat, The Law. I've got John Locke here behind me in my bookshelf. So it really comes down to political philosophy that gives people the best opportunities to succeed in life, because government is not tying them up in bureaucracy and regulations and things like that. So, that's kind of the overall picture, is having people who understand what the right political philosophy is in our country of federalism, individual liberty, and choices, property rights, and not get involved so much in the nuances, because there are going to be new issues that come up that we can't even think to talk about if he were to become governor over the next 8 years. So you need someone who has the right principles and the right foundation that's going to make the right decision when those new issues come up that we can't even think to discuss at this point.
So before I let you go, tell me, what do we expect to see out of you in this new role at the America First Policy Institute? And what do we expect to see on the national scale when it comes to education before you guys dive into this major campaign?
Well, I'm going to continue to work with, like I said, the White House and Linda McMahon and her team and Congress to dismantle the department, answer the executive orders regarding school choice for the president, and hopefully get the Education Choice for Children Act through reconciliation, which will be our first federal tax credit for school choice. And that will help a lot of blue states where people want school choice and just won't have access to it through their state legislatures. It's all tax. It's not on the DOE. But we're hoping to get that passed. But then most importantly, we're supporting states in their efforts to expand or enact school choice. We're working with Texas right now to get that across the finish line. My first thing that I did in this position was to write a letter and help Tennessee get their universal school choice passed, and then helping to improve those policies across the board because there's a lot of experimentation going on in school choice and in ESAs. And we want to make sure everyone gets the very best practices in place so the most families can take advantage of these, and that we bring about innovation, quality, and access for everyone in a free market environment. So that's what you're going to expect to see. If you don't already follow me on Twitter at Erika Donalds, please do. And that's where I try to post everything that's going on both federally and statewide so people can stay up to date.
Amazing. Well, I expect to see great things, and we are so glad that you came on to talk to us about this. So congratulations on your new position, and congratulations on making the decision as a family to go out and run for governor. That's a big one.
Yes, don't you know it? Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast for this episode and others. Go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there, or head over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have a blessed day.